There is the motherhood penalty. Most women often fall back in their career. It's the complete opposite for men. Statistically, fathers accelerate their earning power above and beyond working mothers, but also above and beyond single women or men.
How did you and your husband manage raising children and the sharing of responsibilities in your career and his career?
Oh, it's so easy. Said no one ever. Honestly, if I look back now, I was probably in denial. I was finding it very, very hard to leave her. And she did say at the time, your father would have wanted you to go.
Across the Atlantic, she flew to set up pastures anew as she took a new role overseas.
I would give that advice to anyone. If they're deliberating between a career choice, what's the deciding factor? Who am I going to learn the most from?
Greetings, I'm Ashley Samuels Mackenzie,
And I'm Charles Parkinson,
and welcome to How I Became,
where we unveil the unscripted journeys of inspirational figures.
Hi, I'm Karina Wilsher, and this is How I Became Partner and Global CEO of Anomaly.
If you enjoy the show, could you do one thing? Subscribe. Wherever you are, just click the subscribe or follow button. That simple act can help us grow the podcast in a big way, and we need your support to do it. And if you really want to help play a part in our growth, rate us on Spotify or leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It would mean the world. Thank you. The youngest of 5 siblings with heritage between the UK and Malaysia, this guest story features some pivotal moves. With early experiences in TV production, who could have guessed advertising would be the career she would choose? Rising up through the ranks, she continued steadfast in her vision to then becoming a mother, one son first, then another, increasing the weight to all of her decisions. Across the Atlantic she flew to set up pastures anew as she took a new role overseas, then flying back over into London, not Dover, as she moved up again to a role globally. You may have heard bits and pieces, but now hear her story, from birth until now, honestly. Introducing Karina Wilsher, Partner and Global CEO of Anomaly.
Wow, that's amazing.
Welcome.
Thank you. Wow.
There we go.
My first ever poem, other than for my children, but yeah.
Well, you'll get 2 today. There's one
Oh,
at the end as
amazing.
well.
Spoilt.
This is the story of how you became Partner and Global CEO of Anomaly. I think your story is brilliant for those who want to take the risk of leaping into a startup, which you've kind of done twice.
Yep.
With Fallon
Yep.
and Anomaly, getting in at the early stages.
Yeah.
And how to pick winners, both very successful agencies,
Yeah.
both of which you rose, to very senior levels. So yeah, if you're looking to join a small company, a startup, and get to the top and get to partner level, this is a great story. So let's dive into it. But just first, give some context. Anybody who's not in advertising, doesn't know who Anomaly is and the size and the scale of it, give us some context.
Yeah,
of
sure.
that.
Yeah. So as the name would suggest, we're quite a unique proposition. So we've got 6 offices around the globe, 2 in the US, 1 in Canada, 2 in Europe, and 1 in China. And essentially, we set up the company almost 20 years ago now, but to be a better answer for clients. So as the name suggests, we're very unique in terms of what we do, quite difficult to define, but in a nutshell, quite a sort of end-to-end agnostic marketing services. So we do everything from upstream innovation, new product development, we develop our own IP and products and services, right through to big Super Bowl spots and global campaigns, and kind of everything in between.
Is this because in the description, if you look up Anomaly, you see it says it's a new model agency.
Yeah.
What is the new model aspect to it?
Yeah, well, if you think about, the landscape, the industry landscape is incredibly siloed, right? So clients have a particular business challenge or a problem. If they're going to an ad agency, whatever is the right answer, the answer from that company is going to be an advert. Same if they go to an innovation company, same if they go to a design company. So it's extraordinarily limited. And what we've done is set up a different type of model, which is completely agnostic. we listen really, really hard to what the challenge is or the question, and we're able to answer that by any means necessary because we've invested in a really broad, diverse range of talent and skills. So you're kind of, the premise is we're built to do the right thing rather than have, I guess, a sort of predetermined answer that you're trying to sell to a client.
I get it. Okay. And when you joined, how many offices were there?
So when I joined, there were 3.
Okay. And now there's 6.
Yeah.
So you've seen it on quite a growth journey.
Yeah.
We'll get into all of that.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the beginning.
Where does life begin? Paint us a picture of your early years and how it kind of shaped who you are today.
Okay. Life began in very glamorous Watford. But very quickly, within a couple of months, we moved to Malaysia. So I'm actually half Malay, half English. So my father was English, my mum's Malay. And I'm the youngest of 5 children. I guess no one necessarily has a, uncomplicated family, but mine's fairly interesting. So both my parents had previously been married and divorced. So my mum had a boy from her first marriage. My father had a boy and a girl from his first marriage, separated, divorced, met each other, fell in love, and then had my brother and I. So we were, especially back in the 1970s, quite a unique sort of model of a family.
Did you all grow up together?
We all grew up
kids?
together, but I was quite a tomboy because I had 3 older brothers, and my sister is the eldest of the 5, but the age gap was quite significant. So I remember her at home, but not too much, because then she moved to sort of go to college and things like that. But yeah, it was kind of like, quite an interesting looking family, I guess, because of the mix of ethnicity that we had, and that was quite rare at the time where I was growing up.
What was it like growing up with siblings who were from obviously another marriage, and how did it work? What were the dynamics like with it as kids?
It was a big family, and my parents weren't, they had to work incredibly hard to bring up 5 kids. My mum actually had never, ever been to the UK before. Wow. So
they the first time she visited.
They met in Malaysia, because my father was working out in Malaysia. He was running a rubber plantation in Malaysia, and that's where they met. They fell in love, and then he came back to the UK and convinced my mum to, come with him. And she'd literally never, ever been to the UK before. So she tells the story, she arrived in the middle of the winter, never seen snow before. So I just kind of grew up going, that was like the most amazing love story, really, to follow your heart, and kind of mad to move to a place that you didn't know. But I think travel has been clearly part of my story, I guess.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that you had a really close relationship with your father. What do you remember of him, and what were the values that he passed down to you and your siblings?
I mean, he was an amazing father. He was very strict, to be honest. He was ex-army. He was from the north of England, so he was pretty straight and strict father. And I guess I grew up under the sort of understanding of, the importance of hard work. He actually, he had a day job. He was, a businessman, but he would get up at the crack of dawn to work in the local bakery before, and then come back, do a shift at the bakery, come back, change into his suit, and then go to work to his 9 to 5.
He had 2 jobs.
So he had 2 jobs.
Wow.
Not the whole time when I was growing up, but definitely at the beginning in an effort to support 5 children.
Wow.
So I think I always grew up knowing the importance of work. During the summer holidays at school, he used to give us my brother and I, like homework, we had to write projects for the whole summer, and which I was such a swot. I really loved, and my brother absolutely hated. Neither he nor my mum had ever been to university, but it was an assumption that we would go to university. So I think he set quite clear aspirations for us in terms of wanting us to do well, wanting us to work hard, wanting us to go to university. I remember my brother, who's 2 years older than me, when we were kids, we'd drive past the boys' grammar school, and my dad would say, "That's the school that you're going to." And he'd say the same to I went to the girls' grammar school. It was just kind of part of what his expectation was. And as he became older and he retired, I saw a much different side of him. I mean, obviously he was incredibly loving, especially to my mum, and it was a really, really very, very wonderful. I was kind of fortunate we had such a wonderful family life. But when he retired from his own career, he became a lot softer, and he was an extraordinarily proud father and grandfather.
You get into the creative world,
Yeah.
the creative industry eventually. You were quite a creative child. We're sitting here with an actress in our midst. A professional actress.
So cheeky.
Tell us about your acting career.
Oh, how mortifying. Yes. Okay. I'm gonna reveal. Okay.
Go for
So
it.
I was a child model, and I got bored of doing that when I was about 9 or 10 or something like that, and actually was just really, really interested in drama. And so I did a lot of local theatre groups, and I had an agent, and that's when I started to do kind of professional work. Child equity status, and did various TV programs and radio programs.
Can we find any on YouTube? That is the question.
Embarrassingly, yes. Well, I assume so. I mean, I've been told so.
What would we search?
The one that I've been told is on YouTube is a show called Chocky's Challenge. So I was on that when I was 12, and it's based on a book by John Wyndham called Chocky. And the premise is I played a child protege who could telepathically talk to Chocky, who was this sort of like alien figure. So there you go. You've now managed to get that out of me.
Right, he's searching.
I'm searching now. How do you spell Chockies?
So it's CHOCKYS.
We've got the complete series. So
No,
somewhere
that's just
in here.
The other thing that's really embarrassing is that it coincided with the time that I had a mullet.
Oh,
wow.
Yeah.
even better.
Yeah,
Even better,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it's just like it's a win-win for you.
This is gold. I
Yeah.
mean, not so helpful for the Apple Podcast listeners. Doesn't make great podcast material, but for
dear.
those watching on YouTube, I'm now searching through Chocky's Challenge.
You'll find it. We'll put it up on the screen.
I would, yeah.
Are you in every episode?
I'm in every episode other than the first.
Oh, I just looked at the first. That was the first time.
Let's move on.
Do you know what? We've got time. You know. Don't have to be out by any point.
when I joined Anomaly New York, I was there for several years before I realised that people actually knew it as well, knew about it.
Right.
And I was pleasantly surprised to walk into an all-agency meeting and be completely surprised by someone who had found everything on YouTube, and there was just in front of the whole agency, huge screen of 12-year-old Karina with a Chris Waddle haircut.
who is this person? I need to reach out to them.
I know, Eric Damassa.
All right,
He's
he'll
our
hook me
global
up with
CMO.
with clips. Oh, I can't find any
Good,
of the right bits.
good.
So
I've had
you
I've had my people scrape it.
Yeah, you scrubbed it.
clearly escaped that one. What a
So
shame.
from here, from TV appearances, where does your spark of love for the advertising industry begin?
Yeah, I mean, I was attracted to cool brands and creativity, I guess, in the broader sense as a when I was younger, without knowing what that really meant. So
Yeah.
I'm a kid of the 80s, in so much as that was a formative time for me as a teenager. So if I think back to the 80s, it was like, in a way, golden era of advertising. It was like big, just going to the cinema, seeing things like the Levi's ad, Nick Cayman starring in Laundrette, was just like, it was pop culture, peak pop culture, I think, at that point, alongside, Wham and Madonna and wanting to be a yuppie. And that was just that when you're a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old, that's kind of, you just look up to those cultural aspirations, I guess. But I wouldn't say I could articulate that to go, I want to go into advertising or anything like that. And candidly, when I read English literature at university, and the only thing that I wanted to do when I graduated was to travel. So I had been lucky enough or determined enough I took a year out before I went to university, and I took a year out after I went to university, because I was just super keen to see the world and travel. Again, probably partly inspired by my parents. My mum had clearly made, travelled from one part of the world to another for love. My father had joined the army as a way of being able to travel. So I think that was just a passion from family instincts and values. So when I got back from travelling after university, it was only then that I really kind of was focused on, okay, what do I need to, what should I do as a career? And, naively thinking I was behind because all my friends from university and mates had already started their careers and been working for a year. So I knew I wanted to get into media or one of the creative industries. I didn't honestly really know the difference. I was looking at media, I was looking at publishing, PR, advertising, and I'm just very, glad that I got a job in advertising, and and I just thrived. I loved the industry. I loved the people that it attracted.
You were quite bold, I think. I don't know if it was your first or second job in your application. What did you say?
Yeah, it was my first job. I think now I was probably quite bold, but at the time I think I was just being honest, So my father told me that I needed to have some skills because I'd been too busy traveling. So he suggested that I learnt to type, which obviously makes me sound about 103. And I was really, really good and fast at typing.
Valuable skill.
Well, it was at the time. So I was put up for a job as the assistant for the head of account management at a through-the-line agency. And in my interview, I was just very open and said, look, I really, really want this job, but I want this job not because I want to do this job for a long time. I want this job to get into the industry, and I want to learn a lot. And thankfully, he hired me, and within, I think it was like 6 weeks, he promoted me into the account management department.
I love that. I mean, basically you're saying, look, I don't really want this job, but I'll do this job for
I'll
a
do
bit.
it.
If you give me the next one.
Yeah, if I can prove myself and do it. And it was, the agency doesn't exist anymore. It was a through-the-line agency that was part of the BBDO network. But it was, it was super scrappy, and it was on the job training. It wasn't glamorous. I was doing a lot of kind of, retail and point of sale and things, but it was awesome for someone who is keen and eager to learn, and you just have a lot of responsibility in agencies like that because there's very few layers, and you're all pushing to manage the work that is presented to you. There wasn't any, I guess, more strategic career path. It was like, you're in, keep going.
Get stuck in.
Yeah.
I guess probably helpful, foreshadowing a bit in joining sort of startups.
Yeah.
But and also I think there's a great lesson there. Just be honest and clear about what you want in an organization.
Yeah. I hope I'm never in a position where I'm, overconfident or anything like that. It was just like I had some clarity and confidence to be transparent about what I wanted to do. And I think, to your point, I think that is, you need more of that. People want people to be very open about who they are, what they want, and it actually makes it a lot easier to manage people, I think. And so I did that for 2 years, and then similarly, I thought I had learned what I could from that company. Again, not arrogantly, but what I wanted out of it, I had got, and I was just craving, perhaps going back to the sort of the glitz and the glamour, or perceived glitz and glamour of advertising. There was, back in the day, it was like, you're below the line or you're above the line. And I was like, oh my God, I've got to get above the line into advertising. And Low Howard Spink was one of the most awesome creative agencies in London at the time, and was doing real iconic advertising campaigns. So that was where I wanted to work. And again, I think I lucked out. I literally just wrote a letter to one of there was joint heads of account management, but I wrote a letter to one of them, and he called me in for an interview. He had I remember it really clearly because I thought it was the most exciting thing. He had his feet on the table and he swore loads, and I was like, oh my God, this is just like so cool. And he offered me a job.
Would you chat to your dad about your career moves? Would you say, look, I'm thinking about this and thinking of that? And
yes. Yeah. So he definitely, I mean, he didn't know the industry at all.
Yeah.
But ultimately he ended up in graduate training and recruitment for ICI and Imperial College. So he was connected to, I guess, career development. But he didn't know the creative industries at all. That wasn't his world. He was very proud of me getting my first job. He was very proud of me working at Low Howard Spink. He used to, it's of an age, right? So he used to say things like, always dress for the role above you, and things like that, but which probably doesn't really translate to nowadays. But I think what he meant was, not to limit your opportunities and not to limit a perceived position that you're in. And I think he was probably, when I did decide to move from Lowe's to Fallon, he was more curious or questioning it a little bit, because Fallon was unproven, and Lowe's was such a big institution. It was in Knightsbridge, and all of these things that again carry some weight to a parent. But he never ever dismissed it or tried to talk me out of it. He would just made me sort of go through the thought process, I guess.
Did you feel like you were making a brave move? Because you spent 2 years at Low Howard Spink, and then you moved to this, like you said, it's a big established agency. Yeah. Now you go to this little startup, and what role do you come into? And what was the thinking behind it?
Yeah, I've always been driven by wanting to keep learning, and Low Howard Spink had just merged at the time. So it had become low lintas. And I think with any big merger, obviously, there were, not to say it wasn't a successful merger, but at those moments in time, it, of course, creates a shift in the status quo. It makes people reassess. And at that particular time, there were quite a few of us who were considering what the future is. And I had been there just shy of a year and a half, just shy of 2 years. And I just wasn't excited by the future proposition, whereas Fallon was literally the talk of the town at the time. It was a hot, because it was the newest hot creative startup. It was unproven, but it had the founders, especially Rich and Andy, who are the ECDs, the creative team. They had been attached to loads of great work. I had spent my time at Lohad Spink really, really enjoying the craft of creativity and learning the craft of creativity and spending tons of time with creatives. I was lucky enough, I worked with, Vince Squibb, the late Paul Silburn, doing some like amazing campaigns from Smirnoff, like big brands, Olympus Cameras with Tony Kaye and Joan Collins. And so it was really driven by creativity. And I learned things like, I pored over the D&AD annual, and I was just exposed to this level of creativity that I hadn't really had at McBain's. And so Fallon, I think for me, represented quite an exciting change. It represented a real ambition of creativity, but it also had that small, scrappy. It was a startup, so it had that kind of scrappiness where, and I think that's what I'm always, drawn to.
So you joined in March 2000, Fallon.
Yeah.
You're the fourth account person.
Something like that. Yeah, I think
roughly.
I was employee 14, so I think there was
Wow. So
Yeah.
not many people.
No, we all sat round one big table.
Ah.
Yeah, so I went from bizarrely having my own office that I shared with one person at Lowe's, because that's what you did back in the day at Lowe's, to basically the whole agency on one table.
Oh, so you'd work from this one table altogether.
Yeah.
So you would, over the next 10 years, between then and, well, I don't know the date you first became partner, but you would eventually become partner and managing director of this startup.
Yeah.
How did you do it? Talk us through how someone goes from employee number 14 to managing director.
I didn't do it consciously, in terms of I didn't go in there going, oh, here's an opportunity for me to accelerate or fast track my career. I think some people have the ability or the desire to map out a career path or a plan, or have these, 5-year plan, 3-year plans or whatever. And I actually have never ever done that. But I have always wanted to be really good at what I do. And so I think the benefit of being in a smaller startup is there is nowhere to hide, right? And so that really works for some people, and it doesn't work for other people, right? You can be in a big company and you can be lost and you can coast and people don't even notice, and that's why you come across, candidly, senior execs who maybe aren't quite as talented as a lot of people that they're supposed to be leading. Whereas in a small company, and a company that has, its reason for being was to create a new legacy in the London advertising industry, then you don't have anywhere to hide. And I think I was therefore able to just do well. Just whatever I worked on, we were all incredibly passionate about the work. It was all about the work. And it was just a great environment.
So for somebody listening who's in an organisation, doesn't need to be an advertising agency, and they want to know, they are ambitious.
Yeah.
they want to rise up.
Yeah.
What did you do at Fallon to get to managing director level?
Yeah.
Partner.
I believed in the collective agenda, right? And what I mean by that is know why you are in a company, know what the company is looking to achieve. And hopefully you're fortunate enough to be in a company that has a clear mission. And if that mission aligns with your own personal values, then, the context is really, really good, because you can thrive in an environment where your personal values align with company values, and then you just take the responsibility. And I've always been, again, probably harking back to being a kid, but felt accountable to deliver. And I think that is recognized by, now if I think about the people in, Anomaly, and the people who do well. It's people who really lean in and want to deliver and want to achieve something that perhaps is above and beyond just is beyond a job, because they're passionate about what they do. And that isn't necessarily for everyone, but if you are in a company that has big ambition and is bold in terms of what it's setting out to do, then as long as you subscribe to that and you hold yourself accountable to, leaning in, I'm kind of a all in, I'm an all or nothing person, I think. Yeah. And once I'm in, I'm all in sort of thing. And so I think that's what I did at Fallon. And hopefully I did it in a way that it's very much, it was very much about, we had this phrase at Fallon, it was like, we are Fallon. And so it was, I would never say family, because I don't think work is family, but it was super tight as a crew and as a tribe. As a tribe. And again, at that period of my life, you're really developing as a human, and going through significant stages in your own personal life. And when that combines with a work environment where you feel like you're really aligned, many of my, still now, many of my very, very good friends are from that period. And they're the people that you work with, you go to the pub with. They were at my wedding. They were, it builds such a fundamental connection. And I think that is, rather than seeing that as, you've blurred work and life to such a degree, there's so many positive things, I think, that came from that.
I think you're probably hearing it too, Ash. There's a lot of things you've said there that are really common threads in these interviews we do,
right?
These stories.
Yeah.
Only one out of by at the moment we've done probably your 39th.
Okay.
Story. Of all the CEOs we've spoken to in that time, only one has said they set out to be a CEO.
Right.
That's the plan.
Yeah.
Most say they don't have a career plan.
Right.
Most say that they were about doing the work really well, doing their responsibility.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Another one is you would say yes to things and be up for doing things and just say yes.
Yeah.
That was one thing Phil Thomas at Cannes Lions said. He would just say yes to stuff.
Yeah.
Same Paul Bainsfair, who became CEO of Saatchi, he'd be the one. He'd just be that person where probably not many people want to do it. You put your hand, I'll do this.
Yeah.
And it just creates this like, okay, yeah, she or he is one of us. She's getting involved.
Yes.
And you sort of build that reputation of being someone who can be relied on.
Yes, definitely. And I think my only build on that is I am a big believer in saying yes, and because that sort of, even when it's a bit uncomfortable, it pushes you to. And then once you've said yes, then you have to figure out how you do it, right? Yeah. And again, that is the sort of startup culture. It's much more entrepreneurial. You are kind of, how do you continue to always play the ball forward? I think for sure is my only build is equally doing it in a culture and an environment that really works for you. Because I think you could do all of those things and find yourself in a leadership position, but not necessarily working with a team of people that you know, like and respect. And I think the real magic, and what I feel especially lucky to have done, is both at Anomaly and at Fallon, found a group of people where I can develop and I can obviously achieve with people that I want to be doing that with. I would never take a role or a title. I would counsel against that. Just if okay, you can be a CEO, but are you a CEO in the company that you want to spend your time in?
Yeah.
With people that you want to, work with.
I think another thing is, like, a very common thread is some people have mentioned it, called it, they bet on a horse, or someone said, advise betting on 3 horses. People in the company you think are going to rise up, building a relationship with them. Some have called it slipstreaming. So you build this relationship with someone higher than you, and as they go up, they sort of pull you up with them. But everyone seems to have this theme where they start to build this good, deep connection with people who are rising or at the top of the company.
Yeah.
And you sort of rise together because you all rely on each other. You're all together.
Yes.
That seems to be a key theme. And I think if you're not finding that at the company you're at, because they're not your people, then you should leave.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the really important bit that you said at the end, because otherwise it could sound, candidly, it could sound quite political, right? Yeah. If you're slipstreaming or you're identifying the person who's like, and you go, oh, I'm going to kind of like ride on their coattails. To me, that could easily tip into office politics and a much more cynical kind of way of rising to the top or anything like that. But actually, the real bit is what you said at the end, which is if you're in a group of people and you are acting more as a collective, then that's what you want, right? All boats rise, right? Yeah. So you want to be part of a winning team for sure. And success begets success. So whether that's Fallon or Anomaly, once you're in the zone, there is like amazing momentum to that.
And I think being in the zone and being in the right environment will mean that naturally, authentically, you might see, as Charles said, there's been different strategies, but I feel like everyone that we've spoken to, whichever strategy they saw that they were employing, it was from a genuine place because the environment cultivated them to be like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most important. Going back to the other point of, if you're not in the right place, leave.
Yeah.
If you are in the right place, you'll be able to rise.
100%. And again, I couch all of this of just in a way of, if you are able to make those decisions, but I do think if you're in an environment that isn't right for you, you have to have the confidence, and you might not have the conditions to do it immediately, but you have to have the confidence to know that isn't the right place for you and leave. And actually there was a real pull for me to join Fallon, but there was also a context, that I didn't want to be part of anymore. And I no longer believed in, some of the people that were in theory in charge of my career, because of, some things that had happened at the time. And so, again, just having the confidence to not stand for things that you wouldn't tolerate out of work, then you don't have to tolerate them at work. And that is quite that's quite a difficult thing to get your head round when you are younger in your career, because there's a responsibility and there's a weight, and you feel like you are obliged to adhere to certain things, and because someone is more senior or anything like that. But again, that would be one of my biggest pieces of advice to people coming up through the ranks is never feel obliged to tolerate things at work that you frankly wouldn't tolerate outside of work. And being able to act on that and move and that was it was such a turning point for my career, joining Fallon. And if I hadn't had the confidence to do that, then it would be obviously a different story.
It was while at Fallon 2008 you get some very bad news, and you're going through your career professionally, but at the same time you've got a personal life going on. Walk us through the story of you lost a very close person to you. My father passed away very suddenly. He had a heart attack, and so that was obviously an incredibly significant moment in my life and my family's life. Do you remember the day you found out the news?
Yeah, I remember it very, very vividly. I'd actually been to lunch with my CFO, and it was in a restaurant that was sort of lower ground, so I didn't have cell service. And I came out and I'd had a missed call from my brother, and so immediately called him back, and he told me that my dad had been rushed to hospital in an ambulance. So I went back to the office to get all my stuff, and again, it's such a punctuation to everything in that moment, and everyone rallied, right? And so it was a bit of a blur, but I remember, one of my colleagues at the time called a cab, put me in a cab, and so I was actually in a cab from the office going home. I called my husband to obviously explain what was happening, so that we could drive down to Kent, where the hospital where my father was. And so I was in a taxi on the way back home when I got another call from my brother. That was the call to tell me that my dad had died. So that was kind of obviously really, really tough, and you're on your own in the back of a cab getting that news.
So only a short period of time had passed.
It was no time at all. Yeah, it was no time. Was there
any build up to this? Did you know he was unwell?
No. It was a heart attack, so it was out of nowhere. And I always think, oh, that poor cabbie, and he's like gone back to the end of his day. He's like, oh, how's the day at work? And he's like, oh God, that's a story I'm sure he won't remember, but he will remember as well. But it was awful. It was awful.
What goes on in that period when you have to leave work and then you have to go and deal with this personal situation? How did you handle it?
I think this is probably quite common, and definitely given the job I have, I kind of went into account man mode. So I busied myself with organising, so we had obviously the affairs to look after and organise the funeral and look after my mum. And so you're in, I think I was just in account man mode, and I'm busy making all the plans and, obviously with my siblings, but it was really led by my brother and I, and that was just, it was probably a comfort zone for me to be the person organising it all. And I was pregnant at the time, so it was also it was just, it was a lot, I think.
Yeah. How did you sort of manage your emotions and process it at the time? And did you work with family and around that?
Yeah, I think I look back now and I think I probably didn't process it, is the truth. And that's partly because that's not, I'm not especially good at that, honestly. And I think that is, again, you are your own person, but you're obviously informed by, everything around you. And my father definitely wasn't someone who was especially emotive, and similarly culturally, my mum coming from Malaysia, that's, as a woman in Malaysia, that's not necessarily something that is, so yeah, awkward Brit and and responsible Malaysian woman. So it was not necessarily an environment where you're like, oh, tell me more about your feelings. That just and a generational thing. So I don't think I really did process it. And as I said, I think I went into dealing with it for sure just by organising, and then I became very, very focused on looking after my mum and making sure that she was okay. And so you don't spend a lot of time, or I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about myself. And I don't think I often do. You're working, your job, especially as a suit, your job is to make things happen, lead, organize, strategically set a plan, but get everyone, to the direction that you would like them to go. As a mother, you're constantly in a role where it's very much about others, I think.
Well, I think it's fascinating that, and when you tell the story of that very sad day, you still think to mention the taxi driver and how difficult it was for his day. Which is, not everyone would say that.
Yeah, I haven't even thought about that before, actually. Yeah,
it just comes from this sort of constantly thinking about others and how others are feeling and how their day will be. And
God, yeah, how rubbish. I need to be more focused on myself. No, I mean, that's really a very astute observation. Yeah, I hadn't ever thought about that.
But I think it's at the same time, it's an amazing quality.
It's an amazing quality. And from what we've seen of the many different CEOs and leaders we've spoken to, that people first approach is something that then allows the capacity to lead on bigger and bigger scales. Yeah.
I mean, I think for sure, and especially now, of course, but I've always been, how can you lead if people don't want to follow you? And I think people look to follow people who there is a sense of mutual trust, and that they have their interests as well as company interests and personal interests, of course. But for me, that's such a fundamental part of leadership. I think management, you can manage people and you can manage budgets and you can manage companies, but to truly lead, I think people have to be inspired by a sense of mutual trust and belief that you want the same things.
What was it like? Because you obviously had a very close relationship with your father. He was a confidant. You talk about career, you talk about life, I guess.
Yeah.
What is it like to lose someone like that? How was that?
As I said, I think I honestly, if I look back now, I was probably somewhat in denial for a good while. And, he was a big music fan, and there's like music that I still struggle to listen to, really. And we moved to the States probably about a year and a half, definitely shy of 2 years after his death. And I think somehow that was probably related to it.
In what way?
I mean, in a way, I think in a good way, in so much as it was very, very difficult to, because I obviously was so much more conscious of my mum being on her own and wanting to be there for her and to look after her. So it was quite a compromising decision. It was it was a very, very difficult decision. And my mum's amazing and has always been just the most loving, the most supportive, the most generous, the sort of classic maternal figure, and everything is for everyone else. And but I remember when I was I was finding it very, very hard to decide to leave her, and she did say at the time, your father would have wanted you to go.
Oh, wow.
There's no question he would have been proud of you to go and stuff like that. And I knew that, and I believed her. I didn't think she was just saying that so there was good things about that, but equally there was also, I think, a sense of having a bit of a fresh start and getting away from things. And as I said, I had then now a 1-year-old as well as a 4-year-old, and I think it was just an opportunity as a family as well to make a fresh start and a change.
So you leave Fallon after 10 years, rising up to managing director and partner, to flying across the pond to New York City.
Yeah, New York City.
Your role as partner and CEO of Anomaly. What are the decisions that someone, well, yourself and you think other people need to go through when they're thinking about moving to a different country for a role?
Without sounding glib, don't spend too long making the decision, because I think if you spend too much time, I know people write pros and cons and they do all the diligence and everything, and I think I didn't do any of that. It was considered for sure, right? It wasn't on a whim at all. It was considered, but it was an instinctive move, and I think people can tie themselves in knots trying to make big decisions, and actually what typically happens is they procrastinate, they don't say yes, right? Going back to what we were talking about, because they're just overthinking about it. And I think for me it was, as I said, instinctive. It was a moment as a family. I was incredibly excited by the job itself, the opportunity. It wasn't like I had always wanted to go and live in New York. I'd never had an ambition to, despite my love for travel, I never had an ambition to want to make it in America or work, any of those things. I just didn't have any of that. But I was extraordinarily excited about Anomaly as a company. And I also thought more about, if I said no, I would regret that more than some of the other things. So if I'm honest, we were at quite a crossroads, and I had a few options, which of course included continuing at Fallon. But
what were the other options?
The other options, there were serious conversations about startup in London.
Or being part of starting your own?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And and there were kind of different avenues. I would say there were definitely 3 avenues that were all incredibly exciting and interesting. But I chose Anomaly, again, not because of New York, but because of Anomaly. And going back to, I think every move in my career has been inspired by feeling an excitement about doing something different and learning more. And because of our proposition and because of the model, and it not being just an advertising agency, it was the one that represented the biggest learning curve for me.
So you joined Anomaly as president of the New York office?
Yes. Yeah. So I joined the partnership, and
so you joined as a partner?
Yes. Yeah.
Break that down for us. What does that mean?
Well, Anomaly was set up there were 5 founding partners, and so I was the first partner to join them.
I see. How long had the company been going when you joined?
Now you're testing me. 6 years, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a little while, but still it's sort of startup phase.
Yeah, and it was a very clear brief, honestly. It was, come in and help develop the office, scale the office, establish some of the fundamentals. So I was quite comfortable with that part of the brief, because I felt that that's what I had done at Fallon and helped grow that company successfully. The bits that were completely new to me, above and beyond the market, were the other disciplines, I suppose, that we offer. So whether that was innovation and design and things like that, which that's what was really exciting for me, to not know things.
Did you negotiate becoming a partner? Was that on the table when they offered it, or did you put that on the table?
No, it was on the table. I was a partner at Fallon in London, and again, I think at the time, Fallon was, it was peak Fallon. So, we were most creatively awarded agency in the world at the time, agency of the year for consecutive years. So it was going to have to be something pretty special to make me leave that. And equally, I think, Carl, who's one of the founders, I think it wasn't just about how do you get me. It was also the smarts to know, if you want someone to do what you want them to do against that brief, then having a stake in its success and being motivated. And we're super entrepreneurial as a company. So those are values of Anomaly, which mean it was never about, well, if you want me to do this, I'm going to, barter with this and I need this title. It just wasn't. It was like, right, that's an entrepreneurial company. There's a big, bold ambition. It's a startup. It clearly needs some help to achieve what it wants to achieve. As I said before, that aligns with my own values and also what I think I'm quite good at. And let's have a go.
Were you nervous at all about the fact that were all the other 5 partners men?
Yes.
How did that make you feel going into it?
I mean, all my partners at Fallon were 5 men as well. Yeah. There were some parallels. And I think, again, in truth, that's, especially then, that was not surprising. That was the standard thing. So I had been quite used to being, one or the only senior woman in a room. I'd been very used to navigating the sort of classic structure. So it didn't make me feel anything uncomfortable from I guess from a gender perspective or anything like that, because I was used to it. It does make you definitely kick the tires more on individuals, and just like, again, going back to, are they people that I can actually see myself working alongside with and having, regardless of gender, actually. But of course, if you're the only woman, those things are more apparent. Is it a boys' club? Will I fit in? And so you have to be really believe that you can impact that partnership, and you will like and respect those people. And I was really lucky. That's I've lucked out with the partners at Fallon and the partners that I have and still have, and the growing partnership and Anomaly. Our structure is, obviously different now, and it's scaled, and we've got many more offices, and there are many female partners that I'm really pleased that I've helped inspire and grow and cultivate. But at the time, I wasn't especially intimidated by that.
So you're into this new CEO position. You're in a new country, in a new city. What were your first 100 days like? What did you do to kind of really ease into this role, or adapt into this role even?
It's probably the only time where I have actually had a plan. Because, and I think that is a really good moment when you are joining a new job, or the other time. And I love the end of year and I love the beginning of year, because you are much more, attuned to what are the things that this time of year is awesome. What are the things that you must do before the end of the year? What are the opportunities that you must seize at the beginning of next year? What are the problems that you cannot carry over into the new year? And I think when you start a new job, similarly, you're more conscious about how you arrive. Everyone is looking at you when you come in, especially to an established structure. Everything you do is sending a message. And I think that's true as a CEO anyway. I think that's a really good thing, but it's a really good thing that all CEOs should be super conscious of, that it just comes with the job, right? It comes with the position that whatever you say and whatever you do is translated and has extra meaning because of the position. So when I arrived saying all that, which is really, really serious, I did some like soft things. I as a Brit, I launched Thirsty Thursdays. So
Joel drinking water all day?
Of course, yes,
tea.
of course, yes. Just to create a bigger community and we work hard, but also have a great time whilst doing it. Just the discipline around certain structures and processes, overhauled the process or instilled a process, Monday morning meetings, building department heads and true department heads, which the agency didn't really have at the time. And, just as I said, putting the sort of the fundamentals in place for the first 90 days in terms of the organization of the office. But for me, what I wanted to do in the first 90 days was spend as much of my time as possible doing the things that I didn't know or hadn't been exposed to. So innovation is a huge part of what we do at Anomaly. I had never, ever touched anything to do with, new brand creation or white space identification and new product development, anything like that. And so that's what I spent a lot of my time doing, kind of riding sidecar with our head of innovation in New York, and personally, therefore, really enjoying learning new skills and capabilities.
You do rise up in Anomaly. You spent how long as president in New York, and you become CEO?
Yes. So I ran the New York office for 5 years, I think 6 years maybe, and then I took on a global role, but as global COO first, and then I've now been global CEO for 4 years.
How does that happen? So, again, someone looking to step up into a global role, what was it about you that got you into that position? How did you get into the global level?
I think having an appetite and not chasing a title, right? If you think about what does that actually mean to have a global role, as opposed to how do I become a global COO or CEO? To me, that goes down to what are the fundamentals of being really good in that position. And if you have a global remit, then of course you have to have a curiosity, an ambition, a compassion for a much more diverse perspective, right? You're working with a broad range, a really, really broad range of clients. You're working with the most diverse group of talent. You're exploring new territories. You're figuring out different cultures. That's the true skill of doing a global role well, and knowing how to bring different teams together and what makes great casting. and breaking down some of those silos, breaking down some of the, frankly, sort of, legacy perspectives or structures that can exist between markets or offices. And again, we were really, really clear at Anomaly that because of our model, we wanted to create a different type of global agency network that was very, very different to your typical agency network, where I do think there are bad behaviors and there are egos and fiefdoms and separation and separate P&Ls that just create separation, even though it's positioned to a client as a global solution. And what we were looking to do at Anomaly was to create a much more collaborative, much more connected group of people, 850 people across the globe. And so I think why I was able to do that was that I totally bought into that as a way of working. And the Anomaly values are my values. So again, you've got a head start because you can do those types of, you can fulfill that remit, and candidly you can position that answer to clients or to talent in a convincing way because you believe it.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's a lot easier to sell something when you believe it, right? You actually have conviction that this is the better answer.
Yeah, you don't have to be given a script.
No.
This is what we need you to say. You kind of speak from the heart. You believe it. Exactly.
And at the time, again, we were expanding into the US. We were opening LA. There was a lot of talk about moving to the West Coast and making sure that office started strong. But that's from a personal perspective. My life was like, I didn't want to move my family again for the East Coast to the West Coast, and so the global role was a much better fit for me in terms of my career, but also again for a life choice.
Did it mean going back to the UK for that?
Not initially, and the move back to the UK was 100% driven by personal life choices. So we'd been in the States for 7 years. At the time, my mum obviously had been, back and forth from the US and visiting and everything, but she was living on her own. She's not getting any younger. I was really keen to get back. I kind of felt a little bit selfish about being away, and our eldest son was 10, so we needed to make choices about his education and the classic, are you going to do secondary school here or stay in the States? So that was my decision, and incredibly supportive partners who said, yeah, no problem, you obviously can continue your role as long as you're prepared to travel and make it work,
Becoming global CEO, how does that come about? Do the founding partners give you a call one day and say, hey, Karina, fancy global CEO?
No, not at all. In a good way, I think we have been a lot more strategic about succession planning, and Carl and I have obviously worked incredibly closely together for 13 years now. And
explain who Carl is, anyone who doesn't know.
So Carl's one of the founders of Anomaly and is executive chairman. And he and I essentially led the business, and we've...
From what point were you sort of leading the business together?
Well, so when I joined, he was the global CEO and I was running New York, which was, the first and biggest office. And so it's become it was a very, very natural progression, which is good for Carl, is good for me, is good for the company. So there was never a hard cut, or there was never a surprise or anything like that. It's,
Did you discuss it from the start that the idea would
not
be...
from the start, but from not from the start, but from relatively early on. And we've just worked well together.
Right. So what happened? He then where did he move to open up that space as global?
Well,
CEO?
he took on the chairman role,
Right.
and then a sort of broader portfolio of agencies within the holding group. And I think, for anyone in either coming up through the ranks or similarly in a leadership position, I think that is, that's what everyone aspires to, right? Knowing your next, knowing your successor, and being able to shape them and grow them and make sure for the benefit of the company that there is, of course, new skills and different perspective, but also enough continuity. That isn't always the case. Okay? Of course, people can be incredibly successful coming in fresh to a company, but I think when you have a very strong culture and when you have a unique model and value system, you want the right amount of consistency and the right amount of newness, I think. And that's one of the things that I've been super conscious of as we've grown the company into different markets and obviously a lot more expansive in terms of just the total, population of Anomaly. You're always trying to get that blend of ensuring that the values of the company and the way we do it and what does an Anomaly mean now are really understood, as well as bringing in new talent to continue to accelerate and advance and expand the offering.
You're a working woman at 50.
Thanks. Yep.
Yes.
Proudly.
Not to expose
Proudly.
you. Proud working
Yes.
women at 50.
Yes.
What does it mean to be in the world of work in 2023?
So I am proudly 50 because it's very recent. And so I turned 50 in June a couple of months ago and had a massive party to celebrate it. And I'm definitely not one of those people who like, I can't mention the number. I had like
Big
50 and
50.
huge numbers lit up just around the corner actually at White City. So a big celebration and just enjoying this moment in life. I think when it comes to being a woman at 50, a working woman at 50 in our industry, I think it's quite challenging. I think it's a very dynamic time. So on the one hand, you've got, like statistics sort of showing us that women over 50 in the workforce is actually the fastest growing demographic.
Oh, wow. That's good.
So you've got that kind of dynamic happening, whilst at the same time, in the UK, as the headlines show, it's also post the pandemic. You've got the biggest amount of people, men and women, over 50 who are economically inactive, so not working and not looking to go back into work. So you've got this kind of interesting dynamic. I think, again, regardless of it being 2023, but it being a truth for all women of all at that age, you've also got fundamental changes happening to a woman. Meaning the menopause or perimenopause, which of course now is beginning to be a topic of conversation, rightly. But I think what comes with that for many women is, hormonal challenges, a sort of crisis in confidence. I think, to your point about this particular moment in time, I think there is still an incredible residue post the pandemic where you've got women in general. It did set progress in gender equality back considerably. So you've also got that as a as a dynamic. And then
Why'd you say that?
so in the in the pandemic, and this is sort of well documented, but what happened, I think, is unfortunately it fell back. Typically and statistically, it fell back on the women at the home to really step up more for the children who might have been being educated at home, or obviously young children who weren't at school and needed full-time care. So you had that as a significant impact on women and their career. You had, of course, a lot more responsibility in the home in terms of just running the house, and that continues to be, even if both, even if both the parts of the family are it's a two-career family. It's often typically the woman who picks up more of the household, the share of the household. And then I think going back to the age of a 50-year-old woman, again, is often more likely to fall into a position of having to look after caring for their parent. So it's a convergence of quite a lot of things that make, I do think I think it makes quite a challenging environment. That said, that's the sort of doom and gloom side of it, but I think equally, why I'm feeling pretty good about it as well is that it's also a moment in time where candidly you do feel a lot more confident about yourself as a woman. You're not distracted by perhaps some of the things that played on you when you were younger. You have more conviction about who you are. You know who you are. You know what's important to you. You know what you don't care about and what you shouldn't tolerate. You have experience, right? They say wisdom is the daughter of experience. So you have all these things. So I think it's a really interesting moment for our industry to actually focus more on the second part of that story and look at opportunities. I think ageism is probably, it's a remaining pillar, one of many, of course, but it's a remaining pillar that hasn't properly been tackled in the sort of strive for greater diversity and equity in our industry. And so you've got ageism and sexism as a bit of a melting pot at this age. And I think it's a massive opportunity for our industry and for companies to actually be front-footed about that and tackle it in a really positive way.
What's your message for any woman listening now who is in their 50s, approaching their 50s?
Yeah.
In the world of work, on how to thrive in this time and what are the opportunities?
I think recognize that it's it is a turning point, and it's only beginning to be raised in sort of, I guess, cultural conversation and things like that. But now is therefore, right, a moment to have more confidence about what you offer a company. And of course, our industry has always been, it's a young industry. It's an industry that is obsessed with youth culture for many right reasons, but also it has tended to ignore the fact that the older generation, especially now, have, very high disposable income, and women make up, the share of most purchase decisions in a lot of categories. So I think I would encourage them to be quite strategic about recognizing the value that they can bring to the business that they're in, and I think similarly also being able to assess what skills you have. So rather than seeing it as a weakness to overcome, it's actually what. And I always say the same to women in our company who, are thinking of going off and having a baby or returning mums. I think that's another time when companies are quite lazy and they're looking at that as a time of like, oh, they've been absent from their career, or women are sort of, feel like, oh, what have I missed out, or what have I, and it's seen as a step back, when actually it's another moment when you become a mother, you learn tremendous new skills, and it's about positioning that to a company in a way that you can be quite confident in that actually I've got the ability, now that I've been a mum, I've got the ability to multitask in a way like no other, or to have the clarity of prioritization, or any of these things. Like, these are amazing skills of becoming a mother and a parent, of course. And I'm saying motherhood because there is an extraordinarily unfair situation that happens between men and women when they become parents. And not many people, this is not very talked about, but there is the motherhood penalty, which I think people are aware of. Most women often fall back in their career and it slows their career. Whereas what is even more alarming and surprising is that it's the complete opposite for men. So there is statistically proven that fathers actually accelerate their earning power above and beyond working mothers, but also above and beyond single women or men. So
is there
the fatherhood gain? So there's this sort of like really sort of the parenthood paradox of like, it's actually an accelerant to become a father. I think it's, I think whether it's conscious or subconscious, like just there's of course bias of the representation of responsibility that comes with fatherhood. There is recognition that they need to provide for their family. These are all just like obviously really entrenched perceptions. And then, of course, there's other things. There's sort of more systemic things of, when a woman takes more time off than a man in their career, and there's going to be a difference in, or that can internally to a difference in, their wages over time, etc., etc.
How did you and your husband manage this dynamic and raising children and the sharing of responsibilities in your career and his career?
Yeah. Oh, it was so easy.
Really?
Said no one ever. No, I mean, it's like, God, it's really hard. It's really hard. And, but it is made a hell of a lot easier if you're lucky enough to have a partner who is awesome and supportive. But it was especially difficult when the kids were younger. It was even more difficult when we moved to the US.
Why is that?
This might go back to your question about why you should do a little bit more planning when you move country. Naively, we hadn't quite appreciated the challenge of visas. So I went to the US, obviously. Well, we went to the US for my career. And so we were there on an O1, which is an amazing visa, but it does mean that your spouse can't work.
Wow.
Which we hadn't it's really daft, obviously. We hadn't really interrogated that.
You got there.
So we got there and like, yes. So Dom, my husband, it wasn't his plan, but he found himself looking after our 4-year-old and 1-year-old until we got a different, we got green cards very quickly.
You didn't just get to go off and play golf.
No. Fortunately, he's not into golf. Well, I mean, probably once a year. But which was really hard at the time. Really hard for him, for sure, because it wasn't what he signed up for. Because it's hard whether you're a man or a woman looking after a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old.
Oh yes.
And you're in a new country and you don't have any support structure, right? You have no family. You don't know what's the right nursery school. Like, we didn't have any of that. And I was in a new job, so it's a demanding job. You're looking to also prove yourself. The working culture in the US is quite different to the UK at the time. So that wasn't easy at all. But like anything, you have to constantly assess and make changes and make sure that you're always checking in with each other and you're not taking one another for granted, whichever way it is, right? Whether one's working, whether one's not working. And now, since we relocated back to the UK, my husband's a writer now, and therefore that's given a lot more flexibility to the ability to travel. The children are older anyway. But it was, so whilst that first year of being in the US was difficult, it was a blessing, and he would say this as well, ultimately, because we were able to settle the children and settle as a family without both being super, manic from a career perspective.
Okay. Right, now I'd love to delve into how you do your role as a CEO. Delve into business, because it's clear from your story, I think everybody listening can see that senior leaders have seen you and what you do. They've seen talent, they've seen someone who can perform, and you've constantly been given opportunities that you've earned, rightly, because you're clearly very good at business and running a company. So I'd love to extract some of your wisdom and knowledge for people listening. You've mentioned that you need to feel the business rather than just being across it.
Yeah.
Why do you say that? What does that mean?
What I mean by that is, a couple of things. First and foremost, what we do, we are successful at what we do because of our people. And therefore, it isn't enough to see how it works on paper. You have to be with the people, to feel the business. And I mean that both from how you're supporting, how I work with and support my office CEOs, how I engage with my clients, how I visit the various offices. It's not enough. You have to feel. For me, you have to feel it. You can't get a true read on the health of a business or the health of a relationship without being really in it. And so that's an investment in time, but to me it's so critical, because even if you have a great rapport, even if you have all the standing meetings that you want, even if you have all the structures in place, even if you know your people intimately, it's still not the same as being in it.
So you've got 6 offices overseas around the world.
Yeah.
You said it's important that you're supporting the CEOs of those.
Yes.
How do you support them? That feeling.
Understanding them as people, right? They all have the same position, but they're all in very, very different situations, personally, professionally, different markets, different challenges. So really investing the time to understand the nuances around their office ambitions, but also them and where they are in their own personal development or what they might be challenged with in and out of. And the dynamic, again, when I talk about feeling the business, it's also feeling the relationship. The success of any office comes down to the strength of the partnership and the leadership team. And someone can say something, but unless you're really there, you spend time, you're observing it, you don't really know. And I think that's just as important for clients as well. I would say there are very different types of global CEOs, and I think many of them are successful, but they're successful in a much more distanced way. I don't enjoy that. I enjoy being in it. I think we all do. At Anomaly, we often talk about we're sort of, practitioners as much as leaders. We're doing what we do because we love our jobs. We love being in it. We love figuring out the work. We love all that still. So, feeling the business by spending time with people and in the work and figuring out the answers with teams, to me, isn't just it's not just a checklist. All right, I've done that one once a quarter, go round and make sure everyone's okay, or do the quarterly lunch with the CEO because they're our priority client, or anything like that. It's like, that's just hygiene factor, and that's personally, to me, that's just not a motivating way for me to work. I like to be in it.
I'm trying to get specifically what that means. So does that mean that do you go on intuition? You're like, okay, I feel like I need to spend some more time in this region, or I might need to spend 2 weeks here rather than 2 days. Like, how does it work? Do you have
it's both. So we have, obviously there are, standing meetings, right? There might be monthly board meetings. There's set piece meetings where that is really important, and that is what I would say is the sort of structured process that helps any company run effectively, right? So you have to establish what those are, of course, and they'll be different but they're going to be the fundamentals, right? And it will be a fixed agenda, and those are the sort of set piece meetings. And I might have those again at a office level. I might have them on a weekly basis with, my CFO or with my partners or whoever. So those are what I call fundamental set piece meetings.
That's
which
the
is
hygiene.
Those are and they're really important, because my God, otherwise it's chaos, right?
Yeah.
And it's chaos for you, but also no one really knows what you want.
No.
Right.
Or
so
when
those
you're gonna turn up, when you're gonna call,
exactly. So structure is really, really important. And again, even if you're super entrepreneurial or you're scrappy as a sort of way of working, or you're entrepreneurial or you're a startup, structure is not a bad thing, right? Structure and process liberates people to be really awesome. If people know what they're expected to do, and there are patterned behaviors and set pieces, those are, I think they're really, really fundamental. And we are a high performance culture. We strive for excellence. You can't be excellent if you don't see excellence, right? And excellence is just patterned behavior, right? It's good habits, and it's repetitive messaging and behaviors and values and all of those things. So I would say all of those set pieces, some are hygiene, but they're more fundamental than that, right? They are really, really critical fundamentals. But above and beyond that, when I talk about feeling the business, it's exactly what you say. It's like, okay, my instinct says, the client said this, not really buying it. I'm going to get on a plane and I'm going to go there and I'm going to spend time. And then so it's walking the walk and knowing what you want to, what you want to get out of it. Or, what, they're putting on a brave face. They're saying everything's fine, but bloody hell, it's been a tough grind for them. So it will, of course, mean a huge difference for me to there's no agenda. I'm just coming over to hang out and spend time with you, and we can catch up on whatever's, on your plate, whatever's keeping you up at night. But also, let's grab the team, let's go have a dinner, let's do the things that are really, really important, and actually, of course, make the job still fun. They're like, again, they're super important things.
Did anybody teach you this? Did you read it in a book? Did you learn it from somebody else? Have you developed organically a style of leadership and in this way?
I think it's organic in so much as I would hope that everyone learns all the time from everyone, right? And so I have been lucky enough, stroke smart enough to work with people that I can learn from all the time. And I would give that advice to anyone if they're deliberating between a career choice, if they are at those crossroads, and if they're good, they're going to have options, hopefully. What's the deciding factor? Who am I going to learn the most from? I think is such a and equally throughout your career you learn what not to do as well. So I would say my leadership style is, I think, hopefully it's kind of like a tapestry of good experiences, less good experiences. What do I see that I think, oh God, that's really awesome and that's helped me, so that could help someone else? And what are the things that I just actually, that work for them but it wouldn't work for me, or frankly I don't subscribe to that, so I'll leave that one behind. Okay. But I think though that's the ideal, right? You're learning from, and I don't really learn from, I read certain books and principles and things like that, but I don't really, they're awesome in terms of sort of stimulus, but I think I'm the best, sort of the biggest believer of learning from learning by doing.
Experience, yeah.
Yeah.
I've just really enjoyed hearing how you approach your work. It's very inspiring, and it takes, again, the human-based approach. But as you say, like, that didn't sound right, I'm going to fly out there and make sure that they're okay and everything.
Yeah.
That's a real duty of care for the person first, and then for the business, and for everything else.
Yes.
I think that is a very unique way of approaching things that I don't think we've heard in that way before. Talent is important, which is a common phrase.
Yep.
But what exactly do you do practically in this area?
I mean, it's all about the talent, right? And I'm sure everyone you've interviewed has talked about talent, used that word, and the importance of talent and the war for talent and all of these kind of things that become somewhat cliched, I think. For me, it's about recognizing that there is great talent everywhere, but identifying talent that will do well in your company. And what I definitely don't mean by that is a homogenous group of people who all think the same thing and do the same thing. And that's like, that's the sort of like, that's the worst thing that any creative company could build, right? Because it is the antithesis, I think, of stimulus and innovation and diversity of thought and all of those things that we know to be, a real catalyst to creativity and commercial value, frankly. But I do think it's important to have principles of what good talent looks like for your company.
Yeah.
And help provide a platform for that talent and signal what those behaviors are and reward the people who also display those behaviors. So as I said, things like when you talk about high performance, what does that actually mean? When you talk about being entrepreneurial, what does that actually mean? And breaking that down for people so that they can see if that fits with their own ambitions. So we, in terms of specifically, we invest a lot in nurturing talent, retaining talent, growing talent, identifying talent. We're very, very open to which industries people have come from, which backgrounds people have come from. There is a shared DNA within Anomaly around ambition, but there is definitely no one size fits all of backgrounds or skill sets. The whole premise of the company is built on a real eclectic mix. But we have our own program called DNA, which is a online and live training and development program and platform. It's there to, as I said, to help people really understand how they can be good and how they can be great at Anomaly. Because people can be great anywhere, but they can't necessarily be great at Anomaly.
Yeah, I guess great is defined by the values,
Yep.
culture and expectations
Yeah.
of any given organization.
Yeah. And I think in our culture, great talent is given, autonomy. We like to bet on ourselves, as a company. We have confidence in the work that we do, and I would say that translates into our view on talent.
Yeah.
There isn't a kind of band, a sort of traditional perspective on you've got to be this old to have this title or this job. You've got to have these years of experience to have earned the right to have this perspective, or because you have this title or you're from this department, you get to determine the answer. We don't subscribe to any of those things, If you're good enough, you're old enough. There's a much more open and dynamic approach to talent at Anomaly, and I think that really works for some people, and it doesn't work for other people, which is, I think, a really good thing.
Definitely.
Well, that is the story of how you became partner and global CEO of Anomaly.
How indulgent.
Well, there's a lot people can learn from it. And I think one of the key... Well, before we get to that, I'm going to summarize what people can learn. We've got a poem coming up. But a couple of questions on... We talked about the past, now looking at the future. As you know, Ash and I, we have Unified Creative, this industry movement, bringing leaders together to talk about big industry challenges.
Yeah.
If you were to bring together leaders across the industry from all parts, and discuss solutions to an industry challenge, what challenge do you feel the industry needs to do better on at unifying and coming together on to change?
It won't be an original answer because, and I don't feel bad about that, but because I think it is still such a fundamental issue. I would, just building off, given the conversation we were just having, I would say that we still have so much work to do around talent. I think we have a growing challenge as an industry to actually represent an attractive career choice for great talent and great creative talent. I think we still have been incredibly slow to break down ways of working and structures and things like that. It's everything that obviously you both are awesome at championing and at the forefront of really looking to help accelerate some of that change. But I think it is slow. So to me, it's almost naive to go, okay, what's the next challenge that we could all come together as leaders of the industry? It's like recognizing that there is a significant issue and recognizing that the answer to what we do and being awesome at what we do is talent. And obviously AI aside and all of the wonderful, that's a whole other hour and a half conversation. But the magic and the kind of the why our industry is special is that it's built on the premise of creative collisions and innovative thinking and never been seen before and the rules and all of these things, and yet we have sleepwalked into not recognizing that the demographics of the UK, the US, they've just changed so wildly. And there's such a delta between the demographics of the country and the demographics of our industry. And yet we are paid by our clients to engage with the people that they want to establish relationships with. So for me, until that is advanced, I think it's, for me personally, that isn't, it's not like, all right, next on the list, AOB.
Yeah, still work to do.
Still work to do.
Absolutely.
What is the change that you would like to be able to leave the industry knowing that you were a part of? Now, we've got talent as one, but is there something else that you personally could think, you know what, put time into that, and now see how it's grown?
Yeah, I mean, I think at an industry level, I think it's Anomaly. I think the mission of the company is to be a positive change agent within the industry. And so to have been a part of that mission and hopefully to be successful to some degree. The brilliant thing, of course, of that mission is it's never done.
Yeah.
So it's not my legacy. It's not, the founder's legacy. It's a concept, right? It's an ambition. It's much bigger than the names above a door. And I think that's what drew me to Anomaly. And so if I'm going, if I project forward and want to see what did I have a hand in leaving within the industry, I would say it would be successfully challenging the status quo of the industry and trying to break down some of the historical assumptions, whether that is what an agency delivers for a client, whether that's the makeup of an agency, whether that's, the output, the breadth of output that one single agency is capable of. That's what I'd be delighted if we continue to achieve that.
Excellent. Okay. Well, I think, one of the big things people can learn from your story in your life, one is the way that you think about things, and therefore the way that you lead and operate as a CEO, or just have maybe operated throughout your career, is quite unique and is often, maybe there's aspects to it that are undervalued. So you talking about basing decisions on intuition, basing decisions on gut and feel.
Yeah.
Less so now, but definitely before would have been seen, and still now, as a bit wishy-washy, a bit soft skills, a bit, well, how do I measure that? How do I write that in a book?
Yeah.
And so it can be so easy to undervalue that, but that is of high value because it's hard to teach that.
It's hard to teach, but I think that is the real world. I think there's almost like in our perceived wisdom of business, people talk about what's the business plan? And actually, most business plans are completely made up. It's a founder who's got a point of view and an ambition, and then they have the conviction to do it. Right? So you go, the most successful companies in the world, or the modern marketing brands that have been successful in this day and age, or the creative adjacencies and the talent that's coming through the rank. To me, rather than it being a sort of wishy-washy, it's just the real world. Mm-hmm. I think people hide behind, like I said, perceived wisdom of the 100-day plan, the business plan, the set piece, the marketing programs, all of these things. The job is to figure it out in the real world and land something successful with real people that will achieve something out there, not in the boardroom.
Definitely. I think there's this beauty of mix, which you've talked about, of blending structure and unstructure, and fluidity.
Yeah.
Flex flow approach to business is so key.
Yeah.
And again, kind of hard to teach, but you get it from experience. You've had a lot of experience now. Yeah. You're obviously someone who learns from their experience, learns from things that go well and don't go well, and have that right mindset for it. And I get the sense that you sort of you trust yourself and trust your decisions. Like with your move to New York, it's like, okay, just don't overthink it.
Yeah.
Feels right. I'm going to go and let's see what happens.
Check the visa.
Yeah. And that's it. Sometimes, we kind of have that approach. Things, don't work out, but you learn from it and you move on. But I think it's super valuable and very helpful for people to hear that it's not all about following the textbook and doing things in a textbook fashion, but developing this ability within oneself to make decisions based off
what's the worst that could happen.
And the feeling aspect, which I think is the thing that more so innately is within a woman as opposed to a man is this innate intuition and feeling about things, about people, which is we were talking about the positives of being a mother. It's one of the huge ones, I think, which could really be leaned on and leveraged.
No, I think that's right. I think I think all of that is, and it also, I think it creates a resilience actually that is, again, really, really important to success.
Great. Okay, that's me done.
Yeah. I think there's one thing I wrote down when we were going through the earlier parts of your story. Kind of made a new word, but I feel like one of the things that assists people in their journey upwards, if that's the way they're inclined, is dependable capacity, right? In terms of
Capacity. That's a nice word.
Right, you get it, right? Because there's the dependability. If you're dependable, people know they can come to you.
Yeah.
But second after that, if you have that capacity and that ability, then you can continue to grow and people can continue to come to you with issues, challenges, whatever it may be, responsibilities. So that was the one thing that just like drew me down.
Well, we had Rupert on the show, who was previously at Cambridge Press. So speak to them or Oxford Dictionary.
Yeah, let's get it in.
Get it in the dictionary.
Yeah, let's get it in. Word for 23.
Word for 23.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If Google can make it in the
Exactly.
dictionary.
Exactly. I love it.
What was the other one? Was it compare the meerkat? Did something go in the dictionary for that? Doesn't
One of those.
It's on Dougie's episode.
So, wow. Well, I created this poem. I think it summarizes a lot of what I've taken from today. Difficult to define. Could this be an early sign of a determined young Karina's career? By being upfront and honest, she moved up from typing in office to a new role in just half a year. Being accountable to deliver can show you what to consider when you're going up, above and beyond, and not being fixated on chasing a title, whether it's over here at home or across the pond. Global roles include exploration and curiosity, and by being different and taking your own approach, you might well stand out as the true anomaly. To keep both ears open, fingers on the pulse, is how you can get the most out of a meeting. And that's how you can strive for true greatness, when you gain the essence of that real and true feeling.
Wow. That's amazing. Thank you. Thank you. So impressed. It's like, how do you just you're doing everything? That's multitasking. I talked about wow, brilliant. Thank you so much.
That's the story of how you became partner and global CEO of Anomaly.
Thank you both. Thank you.